Good morning. My name is Lisa Dazel. I apologize for us starting a few minutes late. I'm from the Directorate for Counselling and Career Development, and we have invited you to attend these sessions on Set Yourself Up for Success. Yesterday, we dealt with getting organized, time management, and making effective notes. And this morning, we'll spend some time on stress management as well as some tips to prepare for the exams. Throughout the session, you are welcome to post your questions, and we will attend to those questions throughout the session on the screen. And then after each session, the presenters will be available to answer any further questions. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend today. So first up, we're going to listen to a presentation about stress management and how you can manage stress more effectively in order to be a more successful student.
Good morning, students. Just to share with you, the major stressor we have all experienced has been COVID, the COVID pandemic on a global, national and local level. While you're still grappling with the aftermath of the pandemic, as students, you have to be functioning optimally, as you know, to ascertain academic success. So with regard to the series that we're busy with at the moment, setting you up for success, it is therefore essential for you to be able to manage stress. Okay, so the outcomes of this presentation then is understanding stress and identifying levels of individualized stress. Looking at stress triggers throughout the academic year and effective stress techniques in coping with stress and managing exam anxiety and stress. Okay, so the overview of stress then is, in making sense of the overview of stress, there are two broad aspects of stress. The positive stress called eustress, which can energize you towards your goals, and negative stress, which is called distress, which again will impact on your goal attainment. Focusing on this diagram here, low stress, if controlled, can become healthy tension, leading to optimal performance. However, stress that's allowed to increase can then lead to imbalance, which obviously will impact on your academic performance. Ascertain peak performance, optimal use of healthy tension has to be used strategically to meet targets and goals, and we'll talk about that further. Okay, next slide, in understanding stress can support you in identifying stress, rating stress levels, and both participating in reaching out for effective stress management timelessly. The important thing here is timelessly. So often we see students who've been through months of stress and have had extreme problems with continuing with the study program come to us. There are three main types of stress, or distress as you could call it, that you could probably relate to. There's acute stress, triggered by assignment deadlines. This is event orientated. There's episodic acute stress, reactive thoughts linked to assignment submission. This is thinking orientated. And then there's chronic stress. Should you have a history of poor academic performance, this is thinking orientated. So thinking stresses here can actually include stress, therefore leading to chronic stress. What we're going to do now is just look at the importance of self-assessment and self-monitoring. Identifying stress symptoms is primary in monitoring, control, and seeking support timelessly. Stress is experienced on a physical, emotional, intellectual, and behavioral levels. Again, while one person may experience stress and display stress on a physical level, another may experience stress on a behavioral level. If we just look at some of the symptoms of stress on a physical level, there's headaches, tiredness, breathing problems. On an emotional level, depression, anxiety, loss of control. On an intellectual level, lack of focus, memory, repetitive thoughts. And on a behavioral level, more excessive behaviors, smoking, sleeping, withdrawal, agitation. This is just an example of how you could self-monitor. For example, should you be experiencing headaches right now or tiredness, you could look at possibly 50% of problems on a physical level. With regard to an emotional level, if you feel in control, possibly a 2. On an intellectual level, and this is what affects most students, lack of focus, concentration problems, maybe a 3. Behavioral level, very often you would find excessive behaviors, especially with the student group, smoking, sleeping, etc., possibly a 4. This gives you a score of 12, which is actually above average. So therefore, this is cause for concern and maybe needing attention. Next slide, Lisa. Again, self-assessment of stress levels. It's very important to be proactive and preventative to try and prevent the outcomes of prolonged stress. On a physical level, prolonged stress. Sorry, on a physical level, prolonged stress and outcomes can lead to heart problems, chronic headaches, hypertension, diabetes, cancer. More on a mental health level, you're looking at depression, chronic anxiety, suicidal ideation. On an academic performance level, poor academic performance, which often leads to non-submission of assignments and poor exam results. Okay, there's a whole range of reasons why stress can become quite a burden, and often stress can trigger heaviness, feeling overwhelmed, anger. A quote that I came across said that while stress is possible and stress is inevitable, how you carry stress is what really matters. Some possible stress triggers in the UNISA context. Very often you would find that the entire academic year has stresses as you go along. On an application and registration level, there could be challenges with uncertainty, delays in feedback, registration status, application status. With regard to study material, there could be, again, access to study material could be a problem. There could be delays in study material reaching you. On a financial level, very often there are processing challenges that you need to cope with. And then on a career level, career concerns, choice uncertainty. Very often students rush into making a career choice just to apply and get registered, only to realize that there was limited career information, which then leads to a whole range of stress problems. Possible stress triggers on an academic level: assignments, awaiting feedback, submission challenges, especially now with most of the assignments being submitted online. Study and tutorial support, again, access to tutorial support, uncertainty about what is available. Peer support, access to peers, challenges, especially during the lockdown, many students experienced problems with peer support. And then of course the exams, being unprepared and challenges with online exams. Some personal triggers with students from our experience with students. Relationship challenges are very high on the list: conflict, separation, divorce, isolation, and this can actually lead to not being able to concentrate and mainly motivational problems with continuing with studies. Mental health issues, depression, anxiety, frustration, feeling overwhelmed. Physical health challenges, diabetes, hypertension, cancer. Students with disabilities have particular problems and stresses that they have to deal with. Very often their registration becomes individualized depending on the disability, also requiring special access and study and exam requirements as well. Of course, with regard to the South African context, all of us on a collective level experience trauma and post-traumatic stress disorder, robbery, violence, GBV, murder, and more particularly for students, cell phone and laptop theft, which really are the tools that you require for your studies. Focusing now more specifically on exam triggers, time management challenges. Students often, when students experience problems with exam failure or just not getting the marks that they want, they would cite time management challenges. And this mainly has to do with maybe taking on too many modules, or also just not having proper time management skills in place. Again, unfamiliarity with exam procedures, online problems can become a challenge, general unpreparedness, and historically poor exam performance can also lead to additional problems. How do you take control? We're going to be looking at taking control again on a physical level, emotional level, intellectual level, and behavioral level. On a physical level, very importantly, when do you reach out for medical consultation and medication? Because medication actually can assist with lowering anxiety, lowering depression, so that you can concentrate. Remember, medication doesn't have to be chronic. It can be on a temporary basis for the time of the stressor, like possibly for the exam period only, or the period leading up to exams. The intention to diet is very important. Regular diet, green diets, again, taking control here would be important. Sleep patterns, 7 to 8 hours is recommended. However, we do know that as you move towards exams, that usually gets to possibly 4 to 5 hours. And what's maybe recommended is that if you can in a week have a longer sleep, that will actually replenish you as well. Exercise at least 30 minutes per day is recommended, and this could be anything from walking to more vigorous exercise. Breathing exercises, controlled breathing. There's a lot of value in controlled breathing, as controlled breathing helps to actually stem the emotions, and so that you can gain some clarity in moving forward and problem solving. Meditation, very, very popularly recommended for stress management. Anything from 5 minutes, focusing, slowing down the mind and thoughts can lead to greater clarity, control, and therefore problem solving as well. Coping techniques on an emotional level, communication is primary. This could be communication with friends initially, family. Some of the outcomes here is the expression of pent-up stress. Being listened to can access problem solving, both of the self and other. In terms of the self, just hearing yourself talk sometimes helps you to kind of clarify options, and of course with regard to the other, looking at options that can broaden the kind of options and problem solving possibilities. Counseling is always recommended as well. You have access to the DCCD counselors, and that's for free. You could access us on the website, or if you prefer, external psychologists, and also spiritual counseling is, if that's a preference. The DCCD counseling website has a range of comprehensive support, podcasts, brochures, comprehensive career, academic, and personal support that is available to you. On an intellectual level, it actually really helps to take note that stress can actually be alleviated through your own individualized action. And what we mean by agency here is individually accessing and taking action so that you are reaching out for help timelessly. Accessing relevant websites, especially the UNISA website and the DCCD website. It's amazing how many students only go directly to qualifications only or applications and registration, and they don't actually appreciate the comprehensive wealth of information and support that's on the website. Self-help information as well is also very useful. Cognitive behavioral therapy is highly recommended for stress, and this is mainly because very often when you've been through a stressful period or you are going through stress, there's lots of negative, repetitive thoughts, and to kind of break that pattern of thoughts, reflection, monitoring, and controlling of thoughts is really important. This is actually best done with the assistance and support of a professional counselor. The behavioral level, developing relationships, and these are more resource relationships, identifying and developing relationships with relevant resource people, UNISA support staff, peers, getting a network of support initially right from the word go actually will take you through right throughout the academic process. Moderating excessive behaviors, smoking, sexuality, alcohol, ODL, especially in the ODL institution, we're looking at isolation. There are many students that complain of feeling very isolated and being withdrawn and not being able to cope. So again, reaching out to peers makes a big difference. Monitoring mood, anger, depression, anxiety. Monitoring mood again will be able to, the energy that goes into anger should be redirected more constructively into the study process. Okay, in conclusion, you're looking at how do you get back in control? and also developing and maintaining healthy study and personal habits. Just want to share a quote with you. I'm actually having a bit of a problem trying to access that, but just to share with you that stress is inevitable, and having to take control timelessly is what's really important. I think it was, Nelson Mandela that said that everything seems impossible until it becomes possible. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Amy, for your presentation. There's just one at the moment question from a student. The question is, how as a UNISA student can I handle the stress caused by waiting too long to allow to submit my completed dissertation, sending emails but without positive response?
Yeah, I think supervision challenges are actually very, very common during the dissertation process. I think the important thing is to be able to engage with your supervisor and make your supervisor aware of the kind of impact this is having on you. So I think don't stop engaging, and should you find that you're not actually getting the support that you need in terms of from your supervisor, then by all means you need to escalate the matter, because at the end of the day, if your study process is being impacted on, if you're feeling stressful through this, then you need to take action.
Okay, thank you, Amy. I guess what I hear you saying is also that if you use effective problem-solving approaches, that could also help you manage these challenging experiences.
That's right. And also just to add, you need to take action timelessly. Don't allow it to build up over a long period of time. I think that's really important.
Okay, there's just one more question that just came through. That
Sorry.
The student also needs the contact details for counselling. We will definitely share that with all of you at the end of the exam presentation. And again, you are more than welcome to contact us to have individual conversations about your unique circumstances and the support that you would then need. So up next, we've got Arnold de Tooy. He's also one of our colleagues, and he will be sharing with us some hints and tips for exam preparation. The exam preparation tips that we'll be talking about will be more generic strategies that you can use, and we will not be focusing on specific modules, but more about the learning skills that you need to develop in order to do effective exam preparation. Thank you, Arnold.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll be getting my slideshow up just now. Thank you, Amy. It was a lot of thinking and recollection that came up. Thank you for your kind presentation. Right, let me just get it up and going. I'm Arnold de Tooy. I'm with the Directorate for Counselling and Career Development. And okay, here we go. Good day. As I said, I'm Arnold de Tooy, and I'm with the Directorate for Counselling and Career Development. And our series is Set Yourself Up for Success. And in this workshop, we share some thoughts and explore our feelings around exam success. Let's look, okay, let's see if you're out there. Let's look right at the live event in the questions and answers section in MS Teams. Do you see the live event? And take one of the message at the top where Lisa says good morning and give it a vote by pressing the thumbs up button. And Lisa, if I may ask, are we seeing the vote screen? Yes, I see there it is now. Let's see, please respond and click that thumbs up icon so that we see if you are out there. Lisa says good morning, a bit higher up. Are you there? Please thumbs up. A moment to breathe, a moment for quiet and calm, a moment for appreciation as we go on with our discussion of exam success. Now let's get a quick look at the core issues that one would need to look at. Now exam time is a very intensely focused time. You need a lot of mental energy, a lot of energy and focus. You need to be busy with the what and the why and the how that you need to do for your exam preparation. And you need to ask yourself some questions. How did I pass before? What did I do to be successful? And what could I do better? How could I fine-tune it? How can I build on that? Because I've got a lot of experience. And then also perhaps reflect a bit on why I was unsuccessful. What did I not do? And also what did I do, but that wasn't efficient? How did I study? Did I just study by repeating information? Did I just read the books? Did I just read the guides? Did I pay any attention to what's being said in the tutorial letters? Did I study efficiently? What is it that from my experience I can now fine-tune? And what is it that I can do differently? How did I revise? Did I manage my time? Did I make some time to recall the information? Or was the exam the first time that I looked at the question and said, hey, which information is this? What is it that they want from me? How is it that I need to construct my answer? So what we need at this point in time is a feeling of a sense of control and outcome. And one can get that by getting an overview. Let's say I want to study. Where do I start? I need some control. I must know what it is that I want to go towards. What is it that I must reach? What is it that I must be able to do? How must I apply my information? So what is it about the core of exam success? And as I've mentioned, it's a time of focus. It's a time of getting the ordinary things that aren't really important, getting them in the right space and place, and where you can now direct your mental and energy focus to what you have to do and when you have to do and how you have to do it. And that brings us to the question, how did I pass before? What did I do? How was I successful? When was I successful? And you remember some of the aspects that I've mentioned. And when I was successful, I had a sense of control. I had a sense of reaching something, and I had a sense of satisfaction. So how did I study? What is it that I did? Did I study efficiently? And did I use my time and dive into the work? Did I sit back and say, but what have I read just now? Or did I just merely read and never stopped to figure out and to see how I can use the information? How did I revise? Did I use some time management? Did I practice recall? And then there are all these responsibilities: family, work, environment, social connections, work, social connections. And let's take a breather. So getting that sense of control is where you, first of all, when you have this flood of information, you say, okay, but let me get an overview. And then a very simple thing like, let me count how many pages, how many chapters, how many sections, because that gives you an idea of how to structure your information. It's like a filing cabinet. You know, there are 6 drawers and you know more or less which files fit into each drawer. It gives you a sense of control. And then you start compartmentalizing. So you break your work up into smaller units. And important, you make sure that you see the links between the blocks of information, how they tie together, and how together they make up the knowledge in your module. Mental and physical resilience. What does one need to be a bit more resilient, to counter that frustration and that anxiety? And there are, of course, many things. There's what you eat, how you order your day, are you getting sufficient sleep, and having some joy and fun. This brings us to something that all of us have to deal with. There's a lot of work. And how do we tie that? How do we tie that work, that amount of work, to the time that we have available for studies? What, when, where, and how? If I look at my study material, what is it that I have to do? What are the objectives and the outcomes that are specified by the lecturers? Do I need to solve a problem? Do I have to write and evaluate and compare and solve problems? And when I do it, how must I do it? What are the constraints and the restrictions? Is there a time limit? Is there a limit in terms of the number of sentences or lines or pages? Which themes, which topics, which pieces of the information do I need to get all sorted out? Planning and the timetable. Lots of things to do, lots of things on the plate. How do I go about planning? How do I go about setting up a timetable? Taking those modules, plotting those dates, those exam dates on my calendar, determining how many weeks or how many days do I have for a module up to when I write the exam. Making a plan and allowing time for revision and time for final revision, and alternating between the modules, and then focusing on the one that I will be writing the exam about. When I prepare for the exam, I cannot just read, I cannot just study. I have to find out, what does the lecturer want me to do? What is it that I need to do? How must I do it? And when I do that, I can have a pattern of execution. So here is the idea that I will have a preview. When I start studying a section, I first have a preview of what I will be studying, where I ask myself, what will I be studying now? How does it fit into the rest, into the framework of the study guide, of the chapter, of the section? This piece of information, I have a quick look, I quickly scan through it, I see what the headings are, I see how many headings there are, I see the topics or the pieces of information that they're dealing with. Then I go, and at this point, one can make a few quick notes where you just jot down ideas, that you jot down questions. What is it that I want to get from this? What is it that I do not understand? And then you go on to an in-depth study of the work. Now you start sorting your mind map, you start exploring what things mean, you start sorting the information. And then once you've done that, you go into saying, okay, I've now studied this. Now, what was it about again? So now you recall the information and you start questioning and you say, okay, let me recall this. What questions can I get on this piece of material? Now, the interesting thing is these 3 steps, if you want, in this pattern, don't necessarily just follow sequentially one after the other. You could be busy with the in view and quickly stopping and say, hey, what am I busy with? Or when you do a preview, say, okay, so how will I be questioned on this? And while you review, you may want to quickly look back to see what the answer was to the question that you want to answer. Now, perhaps together with the pattern of execution, one can have a pattern of time brackets. Let's say you want to study 3 hours. And now you want to break it up into 30-minute study sessions. And let's say that in 3 hours, there can be 6 sessions of 30 minutes. Now, just a moment, because if one studies 6 sessions of 30 minutes in 3 hours, you need a lot more time. You won't be studying flat out. You'll be needing time for breaks, you will reflect. So what one can do is have a bit of a break in between each session, where you just get up, you stretch, you walk around the chair, you get something to drink, and then you sit down and take on the next session. Or perhaps 30 minutes is too short for you, then you can break it up into 45 minutes. And the same would apply where you take a break, where you have short interruptions in between, and then you get back to focusing and pushing yourself and getting that information sorted. So how do these 2 integrate? So for the first one of 30 minutes, perhaps if we look at our preview, in view, and review, you could say, let me take about 5 minutes to see what am I now going to study, getting that overview. And then you study that work in depth. And then you sit back and say, okay, now what can I recall? Or for the 45 minutes, you can say, okay, let's get 5 minutes overview, study intensively and intensely for 30 minutes, and let's review for 10 minutes. And then, of course, you take a short break, and then you get stuck and get going again, stuck in. So here we go, putting that together, our pattern of execution. As you can see, we have what is it that I'm going to do, and then getting those notes down, restructuring and recalling. Think of organizing my information almost like building or constructing a building. What are all the things that would be required? The planning, the setting up the tiers, all the building that goes on, getting the end product, or perhaps a different type of building. So what we see here is we see structure. So when you read your tutorial material, you need structure. You need a framework. You need an outline. You need something by which you can recall the information, hooks that the information hang on to. And there must be associations. There must be links between the different parts of the information. If you see the one, you must say, yes, this links up with that and that. Or you can say, wow, this one looks almost exactly like that one. And I better be careful, because when I get a question in the exam, I might just be confusing the one for the other. So one gets these associations, these links, and those give one organization of the material. And I'll speak a bit more a bit later. A note on notes. Now, the thing with notes is we often start making notes a bit too earlier. Of course, there are the initial exploratory notes, but notes is a matter of the mind, where you read and you start noting in your mind what's going on, what you are understanding. So often we may find that it's difficult to make notes, but that's because we just want to go straight to the textbook, and we immediately want notes. without understanding what it's about. We immediately want to get key words and see how they link, but we haven't just read the information at leisure and then more at depth to see what the line of argument is, to see what is the story being told, to see the direction of my calculations and so on. So a mind map starts in the mind, starts with studying. Now, what I want you to consider is, if you imagine one of your modules, let's say the one that you found most easy to study, and picture the study guide and open it at the outline of contents. Now, you know, that's an important bit of information that most of us might skip over. You know what? That outline of contents is a short summary of everything in your study guide. It's a short summary. So if you had looked at it, you might see there are numbers, that there are headings. Now those headings, you know, what you see there in front of you is a mind map. It is from top to bottom, but it's got the same idea as a mind map. So a mind map is just organizing that information in a bit more of a graphical way. So in the middle, you would have, say, the name of the section, or perhaps the name of the module. And then you take those headings and you organize them around your main heading. And then you look at it and you say, okay, the lecturer organized this information from A to X. But when I look at it, I start seeing a link here with a link there. Now, everybody's idea would be different, because that's how you interpret the information. Or perhaps these two words, or let's say the strategy and the marketing, although this might be chapter 4 and this might be chapter 6, I would want to link those two. So you take all these many points and you reorganize them so that perhaps you've got 2 or 3 or 4 groups of about 20 chapters. So what you're doing is you reduce the workload. Well, actually, you are compartmentalizing, you are organizing, you are reorganizing. You're not just studying from A to X. You are making sense of the information, and you are trying to see how things link together to get that building, to get that structure, to get those associations, to get that understanding, and get that framework for making your notes. In the end, we may be putting the pieces of the puzzle together, but you know what? Studying is not getting a two-dimensional flat puzzle organized and making it a single picture. As we have seen, it's multiply linked, and you need your structure to lift out information. Perhaps you need to get all the yellow blocks together, or you need to compare the yellow ones to the brown ones, or you need to see how the white ones link up to the purple ones. And that is where your objectives, the outcomes that the lecturer puts to you, comes into play. What is it that I need to do with the bricks or the bits or the chunks of information? How must I reshuffle my information? When I've got the flat picture, how can I get a reshuffle to make new pictures? So that brings us to the idea that the question is the question. What is this all about? And this is part of the association of many parts of the information. How do I process it? How do I link it? How do I understand it? How do I analyze it, take it to bits? And how do I synthesize it? How do I put it back together again? But the question is also the answer. The question is there so that I can construct the answer. So if I understand, if I analyze and understand, if I take that question apart, I've got all the pointers and links to the answer, all the keywords, all the hints, all the clues. That question is not standing on its own. It is linked to the information that you're studying. And the question is the answer. Part of looking for questions to consider, of course, is your assignments. There's a gold mine of information. What you've got there is the feedback to what you thought were the right answers, to how you organized, how you expressed yourself, the selections you made, the choices you made. Do not forget about your assignments. Take those assignments, use them as potential exam questions. Go and scan over those assignment, that is exam questions. What would your answers be now? What strategies do you need to change? What does the lecturer say? What does the feedback tutorial letter say? What the correct answers are? How did they get to that? So figure that out, because if you do not do that, you may make similar mistakes or errors in the exam. So there we are. A brick, a mine of information. So what we have then is, at the center, we have the question. But you use the question to shape your answer. So in the question then, your objectives, your goals, your outcomes, your headings, your subheadings, and remember, you see those in your tutorial material. So where do you get all these questions from? Well, you look at those topics, the 5 important principles in marketing, and you turn that into a question. What are the 5 important principles of marketing? How does number 1 compare to number 5? Comparison. How does number 2 and 3 link together? So you start thinking about the what and the why and the how and so on. And you use that to shape your answer, to put your answer together so that you reach the desired outcome. Shaping the answer. Now you may find that the lecturer presents the information A, B, C, D, and E. And then in order to answer, you take that same information and you perhaps need to start with C, refer to B, explore E extensively, link that to A, and conclude with D. So you need to shape the answer. You can't just write down the information as it is presented to you, whether in a study guide or wherever. You need to shape that answer of yours by using the links and the guidelines and the clues presented to you by the question. Of course, we get different types of questions, and you know all about them. The multiple choice, the word, the paragraph, the essay, the calculation, the solving the problem. You know all about those, and you use your strategies to answer those. For instance, multiple choice. You read that first part, the introductory part of your question, and you say, okay, now what could be a possible answer to this? Now that first part of the question, you sort it into your framework, you use those links, you use those keywords, you say, aha, this piece of question, the stem from which the leaves of options hang, this stem is fitting into this or that part of the work. And then before you continue, you say, okay, I wonder what I think the correct answer is. And then you say, well, I think it's this, but let me now check A, B, C, D, and E. And when you check them, you say, A is so wrong. E, perhaps. D, icona. So it might be B or C. And then you start weighing them and you select the one. And be careful. Often it's a single word that makes that option either correct or incorrect. Answering questions, you get direction words. For instance, what it is that you need to do, the instructions, the compare, the explain, the discuss, the solve, the draw up a balance sheet. And then the content words, it must be a balance sheet. You must explain, you must give a definition of this information, of that information, the key words linking to the information. And then the specification words, like do it one page, or do a paragraph, or do it for 25 marks, or whatever. Playing the game, scoring the points. So let's say, what makes a soccer team win? What makes a soccer team win? Give yourself a moment of reflection. What is it? Is it preparation? Is it planning? Is it strategy? Is it hard work? Is it team spirit? Is it practice? Is it dedication? Is it playing the goal? Playing the ball? What is it that makes the one team win and the other team not win? Of course, now all of these things I've mentioned are important, and you won't win if you don't do those and whatever else may be needed to play the game. But what is it that makes the one team win? It comes to the goals that are being scored. Now that team can run around the field, can dribble, can whatever, all the moves that you can do with that ball, can pass it, and whatever else one does with that ball. If one does not score that goal, you are not getting the marks. You have to score the goal, and the team scoring the most goals is the one that wins. Linking to the exam, what is it that makes you pass an exam? What makes you pass an exam? Now, if you think a bit, is it the time management? Is it the planning? Is it the making notes? Is it study regularly? Is it having good sleep? Is it eating well? Is it what makes you pass the exam? And by the way, what is it that you will be doing in that exam? So what makes you pass the exam? Is it reading the question papers, starting with the ones that are easier to answer? Is it analyzing the question? Is it keeping your eye on the watch? All of those, of course. But what makes you pass it? And that brings me again to the essential question, what is it that you do in the exam? You will be writing in all of those things, but the most essential thing that you will be doing is you will be answering questions. So obvious, or is it? Now, often one may get that someone would say, oh, when I wrote that exam, I felt so good. I wrote everything I knew. I answered, I finished on time. And look at these marks. I knew the work. I wrote what I knew, and I failed. Remember that soccer team? Playing all across the field and not scoring the goal. Perhaps you have not analyzed the question. You have not rearranged the information. You haven't kicked the goal by answering the question. You wrote a lot, but did you organize your information according to the requirements of the question so that you may be awarded a goal or a score or a mark so that you can total up to passing well above 70%, close to 90, or even better. As focused and as dedicated as that. Now, while this is on the screen, some quick other thoughts about the exam. Try to answer all the questions. If they are, okay, this depends now on how things play out with the online exams, but this is an example. If you've got 4 questions, counting 25 marks each, and you overspend your time on the first 2, you don't really touch on the third one, and you don't have time for the last one. So what happens? You can only get about 50% or a bit more. So if we subtract all the errors, you might fail. Why? Because the ones you knew best, you spent too much time on, and the others you did not pay attention to. Also, make full use of the opportunity of writing the exam. Putting things together. The structure, the organization, the reorganization of fitting or refitting the knowledge to fit the purpose, a representation of my understanding and my structuring of the work, how I present the information, how I learn, how I study, how I fit all these things together, interlinked, leads me to getting to my grand finale, executing the exam. And now those things which I've already mentioned about making full use of the opportunity. Spend that full hour, the full 2 hours. Don't leave early. Go and revise. Go and double check. Go and think. Don't start changing answers just for no good reason because you're starting to doubt yourself. But do make sure that you've been doing the best that you can and that you have addressed all issues. So, time. Question. Answering. Verification. Playing the full game. Can one enjoy this experience? Yeah. Enjoy exam? Well, look, there must be something positive that you can get from the exam experience. Even if it's just the satisfaction of knowing that you did well, you tried your best. The things that you were doing throughout preparing for this exam, they just came together. Why? Because you practiced. Why did you practice? You practice to answer questions. What is it that you'll be doing in the exam? You'll be answering questions. So you have been practicing to write the exam. So when you get to the exam, you are already halfway, 3/4 there. With the satisfaction is reminding yourself of the outcome that you are studying towards. The next step, what you do after the exam, you repeat the pattern, you continue the pattern, you prepare for the next, you go for the next year, climbing step by step. Thank you.
Arnold, thank you very much for your very thorough presentation. There's one question maybe while you are still in the mode of presenting about the whole issue of the online exams. Let me just get to that question. So the question is about the person wrote that it's their first time to write online exams. How does one tackle the exams? Are there any specific tips that can be shared? How would online exams then be different from the venue-based exams? Is there any difference in terms of the preparation?
Okay, of course, there are differences in how you participate in the exam. There are definite differences. In terms of the mental preparation, okay, first of all, the requirements or the instructions might be different or very similar, of course, but there may be different emphases for the different modules. So I won't attempt to give you specific directions and information on that. There should be and there will be sufficient information communicated with you as to how to go about presenting your answers or giving your responses. But listen, the basic ideas, they're all still valid. They're all still valid. Mental preparation. Getting your things sorted out in time. For instance, just as you would go to the exam venue and make sure that you take your taxi well in advance, you will now go and make sure everything is set up, that it is working, that you are ready to take this exam, that you can read on your screen, that you can submit, that you've got all the software open that you'll be attending to. If you need a scanner, or a printer or whatever, that you have those ready. Now, important, don't try and get pre-constructed questions that you have ready, and when they ask you a question, you pop it into the system, and because they pick up these things called plagiarism, this software, turn it in, which picks that up, and you will fail. You will fail. So again, the key word is the question, shaping that answer of yours to fit the question. Now, the type of exam, it depends. So just to recap on how to prepare for the online exam, many of the things are exactly the same. Perhaps some more, yeah, also some breathing, some whatever else you need. But the specific directions would be for the lecturers to communicate with you. While on this topic, I'm thinking, Lisa, of notes. You know, once a student told me that she has been failing a particular module now for 3 times in a row. So I said, okay, please come and visit, bring along your study guide, your tutorial letters, your assignment questions, your textbook, and your notes. So when she arrived, I said, well, I looked at the things and said, okay, where are the notes? And there she showed me some printed material, which she had bought. They were like printed summaries. I said, okay, it was a law module. And when I looked at these notes, so she wasn't making notes in her own hand. She wasn't understanding. She was trying to memorize those notes. Why? Because they are, according to her, a summary. They are sort of the ultimate answer. And then I looked at the notes and said, wait a minute, the numbering, it starts off correlating with the numbering of the study guide, but the numbering changes. And it's dense material. Wow, you can't study something like that. And I still, but just let's go to the tutorial letter and let's look. And there I found the most basic insightful things. You need to read the information in the study guide. They give you a case study and you have to apply certain principles of law. And there she was studying those laws in detail. You wouldn't want to know the nuts, bolts, everything about that law. And she was trying to memorize it. She was on the field. She was playing the wrong game. She wasn't scoring any goals.
Thank you, Arnold, very much for that. I think you raised a very important point about, you know, that the what you call the mental preparation is not, you know, different to the venue-based exams, but that paying attention to, you know, having your space ready to complete the online exam is very important. So looking at your technology, you know, are your devices, basic things such as, you know, are your devices charged? Have you tested your internet connection? And I think also very important is to very carefully read through the instructions that you will get for each module. Because remember, the instructions for the online exams may differ from module to module depending on the type of exam. So it would be very important for you to keep an eye open on any announcements that are being made on My UNISA about the exams, and then to go and read those instructions for each exam paper very carefully. I think also what would be important is in terms of space, that you also inform people who are staying with you or who will be in the same space than you when writing your exam, to negotiate or to inform them that you are busy with an online exam, you know, that interruption should be minimized. So just making everybody in your household or in your place of residence aware that you need some space to complete the exam.
Thank you.
Okay. There was another question, Amy. I wonder if you can help us with this one. The question is, how may I deal with panic attack caused by stress during the examination? Is it possible to be given a chance to finish writing my exam paper?
Lisa, I think that would actually depend on a panic attack is actually quite a serious experience. Obviously, it's going to mean you feeling a sense of loss of control. What you can do possibly is maybe exit the exam, try and get to some treatment as soon as possible. I would recommend get to a counseling office or get to a psychologist as soon as possible, because what you can do then is once you get a medical report or a report from a counselor or a psychologist, you could ask for an agrotat, so that when you do take the exam at a second stage, you will be in a more conducive state.
Thank you, Amy. Well, you mentioned something about, panic attack being a very serious condition. Would you mind just sharing some of the things that one could use to determine if you are in fact having a panic attack, or whether it's just extreme stress that you're experiencing?
Yeah, usually if a person is having a panic attack, they will have problems in breathing, feeling very agitated, feeling completely out of control. Which is again different from feeling stressful. When you're in a period of stress, there are some levels, but again, the intensity is not as great as when you have a panic attack.
Okay, thank you very much. There's just a follow-up question earlier about the student who was concerned about, wanting to submit his dissertation and not getting feedback. So the follow-up question is, how should I behave if I am disappointed by a person who was the right one to help me find a solution?
Gosh, it's a bit of a vague question. Maybe if the student could give us an example of what exactly is the student talking about. If you're talking about not being satisfied with your supervisor, well, initially, I think you need to address it with your supervisor, and then obviously you then have the right to take the matter up further.
Okay, thanks very much, Amy. I would also suggest in this case, as you said, if there's more specific information that the student can also choose to engage with us by email, in order to get a deeper understanding of the circumstances and how we could possibly support in terms of problem solving.
Fine. Okay. Yes. Good. Yeah. That's also an option.
Okay. Arnold, there was a question about the exams. This person was just wondering how come it happened that his performance dipped when he did online exams as to when I did a venue-based exam. My preparation was the same for both.
Yeah, that is now something that one needs to explore. And I'm wondering what you have been thinking about. Is it the person that posted posted the question? It could. There are environmental factors that you make where you're able to finish the paper. Then I need to ask, what was required of you? What type of questions did you get? How did you have to answer those questions? Was it an automated scoring? Was it multiple choice? So I would need a bit more understanding. But so typically why one could do worse is that it's the environment, it's all those factors that Lisa has mentioned. However, if you feel that you've answered in the same way that you would have in a venue, then one would need to explore a bit more. I'm wondering about how the scoring would take place, and I'm wondering if you get feedback on the exam experience from the lecturers. But straight out, I cannot give a simple answer. One would need some more exploration and some more understanding. And you could perhaps even think of doing a mock online exam and see how you go. If you did get that exam question paper, okay, you might not. We take a similar one. How would you score that? How would you participate in that if you had to do it, say, on your PC within Microsoft Word or whatever other software it is that you're using? So you'll have to do some reflection. What is it that you might have done differently? What is it that you can do differently in order to make sure that the next online exam gives you a better experience?
Thank you, Arnold. Again, if, as you said, thinking about, what was different in terms of the online exam, and as you said, there may be quite a number of factors that could impact. One thing that I'm thinking about, which is also valid for all of us, is that the last semester was the first time that you may have had to written an online exam. So just the mere fact that it's a new way of doing things could also have contributed to a drop in your performance. But again, if there are specific circumstances, it would be best to contact us by email so that we can explore what happened and maybe thinking about what to do differently. Arnold, yes, also there's quite a number of questions about the exams now. Let's start with one. I would like to know whether you start with a difficult question or an easy question.
Okay, it depends also now on how the questions are presented online. If you have a choice of where you want to start, I wouldn't know that. But I think what one could do, depending again on how the exam presents itself to you, it might be useful to quickly scan, because how do you determine what is easy and what is difficult? It might link up to the amount of information or the amount of study or the amount of recall or understanding that you have about it. So if one could quickly scan through the information and then sort them into the ones that I'm more comfortable with answering, the other ones and the more difficult ones. Now, if you studied by means of outlines and summaries, again, now it depends. Usually in the exam answer book, not on the paper itself, but in the book, one could write down at the back of the book. Let's say you take that difficult question first, and you quickly jot down some notes that you can recall, and you leave it at that. And you do so with some of the others. And even with the easier ones, now I'm talking now more of written questions, because with the multiple choices, you have to take them in sequence. So what you're doing is you actually then already activating your thinking about that difficult question. You're not answering it right now, but you're putting some ideas down on the paper. And then you start with the easy ones. But now you need to be careful not to overextend yourself and go over the amount of time, because you need to do some time planning. You need to know more or less how much time you need to spend per question. So you do your easy questions, you go to the next ones, and as you answer, even if while you're busy with the easy ones, you suddenly remember something about the other question, and you go back to the back of your exam script, and you jot down those extra things that you recall. And those would be like keywords, the essential things that you would need to answer the question. So perhaps in a way, it's not as simple as just doing it sequentially, but get the difficult things down so that your mind can work on them at a very basic level. So already then, when you deal with that question, you've already got some ideas to work with. Then it's not like now I'm starting fresh and cold with this question. You've already given it some consideration.
Okay, just to add also on what Arnold has mentioned, it is true, it is best to start with the easy questions because they sort of motivate you. When you start with a difficult question, it will sort of demotivate you, and it might even trap the recalling capacity of the one that you know. The other thing on that question is check the mark allocation. It depends, like the way Arnold has mentioned it, is that when you jot down what you think you recall on the difficult question, not jotting it out on the answer sheet but on a side paper, it will assist you while you are also checking the marks to recall some of the things. So it is important to start the most simple ones that you understand, to motivate you or to help your mind remember the ones that were a bit difficult. I want to leave it at that.
Any other questions, Lisa?
Sorry, the next question is, would you advise students to answer in the exams using comprehension, your own understanding, than using word by word from the study guide?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Because you should digest, you should assimilate that information while you're studying. And remembering word for word, my goodness, what a difficult thing. You have to understand, and then from your understanding, you formulate, guided by the question. So there's no way you can go word for word. And that again is the problem with starting to make summaries without understanding the work yet. That is when one wants to transcribe, or just everything you see on the printed page, you write it over in your handwriting on the written page. That might have some value, but wow, it's tedious, it's time consuming, and it's not making you it's not effective, it's not efficient, and it's actually a waste, because you could just have read it, taken a highlighter and highlighted, first read it and then say, okay, what is this chapter dealing with and how do they explore this theme? So word by word, I don't think so.
Thank you, Arnold. I guess it also, as you said, very importantly, that your preparation will help you to be able to respond to the exam questions. And you also mentioned earlier that even if you are writing open book exams, for example, or the online exams, it would be important to be able to answer the questions in your own words, especially paragraph and essay type questions. Since if you are just going to copy from a study guide or from your textbook or from other material, it will be viewed as plagiarism.
Yes, those lecturers know their study guides word by word. And wow, when they see it given back to them word by word, you won't get marks. They will say it's plagiarism. Or they run it through Turnitin, and they say, well, you copy and pasted it from the internet. 0 marks.
Yeah, so that's something to be very aware of. Amy, there's a question here about how can I manage or strategize on playing football as a way of balancing my physical and mental health. I want to squeeze it in my timetable.
Okay, I think if you're talking about exams and squeezing something in, it actually makes sense. Just noting that exercise during exams is really, really important, because firstly, it's cathartic in that it relieves you of the stress that you are undergoing, whether you're thinking through exams, or you could have had experiences that were not so good with exams as well. So exercise is really important in that regard. The important thing here is flexibility. And you may have been playing soccer maybe 3 times a week prior to the exams. You may now have to reduce that time to maybe 1 time a week. So I think it's important for you to also negotiate with your peers that you will not be available because you have exams. I think it's all about negotiation and flexibility at this stage. But don't drop it.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Amy. I guess, as you spoke earlier with stress management, it's important to also attend to the physical aspects of, fitting in activities that will help you to manage stress. And if soccer is the way that you manage stress, it would be important to continue. but then taking into account the time that you've got available to attend to your exam preparation then specifically. Let's see another question. There are two, I would call them almost technical questions about the exams, and I would really be hesitant for any of us here to answer them. I am going to read them out, but I think the best would be is that if you need clarity on these questions, either check my UNISA for announcements, or then we can also follow up on the questions and perhaps just send some guidelines to you when we send you an email to ask you to complete the online evaluation form. So the first kind of technical question is that there were two students who mentioned that they are, when they received their exam confirmation letter, for each module, it would seem that there are 2 time slots indicated on the exam confirmation letter. So honestly, I am not sure how that will work. I'm not sure if any of my colleagues would be able to respond to that, but if not, let's see if we can manage to get some feedback from the relevant sections that deal with the exams, so that we can also be aware and can also share that information with you when we follow up about the feedback. And then the second question is about the structure of the exam online. So this person asked, am I allowed to skip questions and return back in terms of multiple questions? So that's the first part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, how do I make sure I manage during my first experience? So I'm hoping that the information that we shared with you this morning about stress management and exam preparation will certainly help you to manage your first experience of writing examinations, perhaps, or first experience of writing online examinations. I also just want to point out that on our counselling website, the address is there up on your screen. Under on our website, there are many resources available about exam preparation, and we've also put together some information about the online exams, managing how to write the online exams. So this morning's presentation, together with those further online resources, I am hoping will help you to manage more effectively during the exam. In terms of the structure of the online exams, how I've understood it is that you are given the questions and you are given a time within which you must complete these questions, but that you would be able to move between the different questions, which will also be important in terms of once you have completed all your questions, that you could go and revise or review or just check that you've answered all the questions. But again, I think the more effective way would be is that if you go and read the guidelines for each specific module, there will be guidance in terms of, those arrangements. Let me just take a look at other questions that just came in. There were also questions about the exam dates. This person was just asking if the exam dates that have been released, will they be changed, or can we focus on the dates being valid and won't change? As far as I'm aware, the final timetables have been made available. I am of course aware that in the first semester they had to make some changes due to also UNISA having to get ready for the online exams. So I think I won't be able to comment on, whether it can be promised that it is the final exam dates, but as far as I'm aware, the final exam dates were posted. So I think the best would be, again, for us rather to consult with the exam department and send you further feedback about that. Let me just check for any other questions before we maybe wrap up. Arnold, there's just one, it would seem for now, a final question about the exams. What is the best way to approach the exams? Is it to study the whole study guide and a prescribed book, or to go through the previous exam papers and the feedback on the assignments?
Okay. Now, you need to study according to the directions. So I gather that you've got a textbook. So studying the textbook on its own, I think is not the right idea, because there's a lot of information and it won't, when you go to your tutorial letter, those directions will focus you on where you should spend your attention or the most of your energy. The study guide, you can probably study everything, but again, according to the guidelines. So it's like, say, baking a cake. You can jumble all the ingredients together, or you can follow the instructions to get the desired result. So using the tutorial letter as sort of the springboard into the study guide and into the textbook would be very important. So it's not a matter of just studying the textbook or studying the study guide. It's a matter of how you are studying it, what you're doing with the information, how must you use that information to enhance your knowledge, what is it that you need to achieve to be able to do. So if you just almost study because there's a textbook and a study guide, I don't think that's efficient. Yes, you need to study everything that is said, that they tell you to study. It might be that you could focus a bit more on the study guide, and it depends. It depends on what the instructions are, the guidelines are, the tuition is that you get from the tutorial letter and from the study guide. Those two go hand in hand. So that's where you need to direct your attention. And if the tutorial letter says this is the textbook, it depends on also on how the course material is structured. Some of those study guides will just point you to the textbook and give you directions about how to study the textbook. In that case, the textbook would be the focus. So it depends. Check your TUT letter. Check it, check it, check it. Read it.
Thank you, Arnold. Just in addition, in my opinion, the use of the exam papers and the feedback on the assignments are also very useful to prepare for the exams, but maybe not in the way that students may imagine. So, for example, if you look at the information that Arnold shared about preparing for the exam, really doing that deep learning, making notes as you're studying, understanding your study material, and the role of the exam papers or the just revising the assignments and the feedback would then be actually for you to test your knowledge. You could even use exam papers or the structure of the questions in your assignments to write what Arnold referred to earlier as kind of a mock exam. So you try to complete an exam paper then in for example, 2 hours, if that's the duration of the exam. So for me, the role of the exam papers especially would come in a bit later in your studies, after you have worked through the study material, you've made your notes, and the exam papers are then to actually just test your knowledge.
If I may add, so you use the exam paper to get an idea of the types of questions that you'll be getting, the type of material, or indication of the material being study material that comes into play in the exam or in a exam. But you cannot only study the exam paper and only study answers that have been worked out for that exam paper, because that exam paper represents parts of the course material, and other parts of the course material, as well as those same parts, can be represented in the next exam paper. And yes, the practice aspect is very important. How am I approaching answering this and the rest of it? Thank you.
Okay, just as a last question that came in, the person is wondering, why is it that when I receive my results after the exam period, there is no breakdown of the overall results and the marked paper? It's demotivating not to see where I went wrong and what I can improve on. Arnold, do you have any insight or something that you can share about that?
Yeah, that would have been nice. That would have been nice if one can get that feedback from an exam. So the type of statistics that one could get from the exam, I doubt if they will share that ever, because you know, it's those statistics are continually added to as the marking goes on, and already it's, yeah, it could be, but I don't know if they will do it. I don't think it's policy of the university to make that information available. In terms of feedback on the questions, well, that would have been nice as well, but I don't know if they want to divulge that information. It would have been nice. But then also you get a lot of feedback from your assignments, and perhaps you mentioned the what is the question that you had, the motivation. Perhaps not focus too much on that aspect, and focus on what you could have achieved or what you did achieve to motivate yourself.
Thank you, Arnold. Just in addition, maybe to just use feedback that one of the other students sent. He asked earlier about, you know, why is it that the performance dropped from the venue-based to the online exam? And then he also just shared with us feedback that based on the information that Arnold specifically shared, and the discussion we had about, you know, the preparation that you can do for the online exams, it helped him to understand some of the aspects that he thinks may have contributed. So why I am sharing this is that it's important, or one of the strategies that you can use, especially if you have failed an exam, is to go and reflect on what happened before, during, and then, before the exam as well as during the exam. Because oftentimes, you know, we find that students may have failed an exam, but then when you probe deeper, or when you ask the person to reflect, there are some aspects that they then think about. For example, they didn't have enough time to study throughout the semester. Something traumatic happened just before the exam, or the way that they were studying was not helping them to memorize stuff for the exam. So for me, it's important to think about how you can reflect on your exam experience. And then just in terms of feedback on the exam questions themselves, there are instances, especially with essay type exams, and if you have been struggling with a module for quite some time, there's nothing preventing you from contacting your lecturer for the module to have a discussion about some of the aspects that you could pay attention to. So I would also encourage you that after you've reflected on your exam writing experience and you still feel that you know, you are not understanding where you went wrong, you must feel free to contact your lecturer to get feedback on some of the areas that you may want to pay attention to when you go and write your next exam. Okay, so that's all the questions that we have for this morning. As I've indicated, we will be sending you an email with a link to the feedback form, and we would appreciate if you could complete the feedback. We are also, as a team, this is the first time that we have presented these kind of sessions online. So it would be important for us to understand some of the areas that we could also think about improving. And then we will also try to get information about those technical questions that I mentioned about the exams. If there's anything that we can share with you, we will also certainly do that. I want to thank my colleagues, Amy and Arnold, and also to all of you who have attended. We appreciate your patience with us, especially at the beginning of the session. But I think we managed to complete the session on a good note. And thank you also for the feedback you've already shared in the question and answers, and for also participating and helping us to have further discussion about some of the issues that we've presented. Thank you very much. And again, you're welcome to contact us by email. Email address is there, counselling@unisa.ac.za. And as Amy mentioned earlier, we've got many self-help resources on our website about these topics, but also many others. And the website address is unisa.ac.za/counselling. Thank you very much.